50th anniversary of the Aurora Newmarket Club, we'd like to look back over the past 50 years to celebrate all that we have achieved and also look forward to our future as a club in the Canadian Federation of University Women. Many women have shared their memories with us, and we will share their thoughts with you. But first we need to set the scene. How did this club of ours come to be? And what was York Region like for the women of 1957? And so we begin. York County in 1957 was a very different landscape than the sprawling area that we call York Region today. Relatively small towns and seemingly endless farmers' fields and forested areas dotted the landscape north of metropolitan Toronto. The role of women, and particularly of university graduates, in 1957 was also significantly different. The changes that were to take place in the following half-century were remarkable and of great importance to the women who joined together on February 19, 1957, at King Crafts Hall in King City to discuss the formation of a University Women's Club of York County, the 88th club in Canada. It was moved by Dr. Lillian Langstaff and seconded by Cicely Thompson that the group form a University Women's Club. The motion was carried, and on April the 20th, the charter was granted. The 43 women who attended the inaugural meeting of the club on May the 7th were declared charter members. They came from all over southern York County, 15 women from Richmond Hill, 11 from Aurora, 16 from King Township, and 1 from Newmarket. Their aim was to keep ourselves informed and active in modern affairs. Life was more formal. Skirts were de rigueur for all meetings. A shirtwaist dress, a twin set, or perhaps the very popular reversible pleated skirt. This is what one wore to a club meeting. In 1957, daily life was less expensive. A loaf of bread cost 19 cents, a top-of-the-line Pontiac cost $5,782, and a postage stamp was 3 cents. But salaries were lower too. The average family income was $4,657 a year. In its first year, the new club set fees for a variety of purposes. 25 cents per member for the rental of the hall, and 10 cents a meeting to establish a $50 scholarship to be given to a pupil in one of the schools in our area. The annual fee for members was to be $5. Mrs. Johnson, the president of our club, spoke to the inaugural meeting about the aims of our club. She stated that, quote, "We as potential leaders in education, ballet, art, music, and freedom will come together to meet with speakers, to think our problems out carefully, pray for help and guidance, and act upon these thoughts to fulfillment." In the fall of 1957, the club welcomed a guest speaker on archaeology in York County. By October, the members embarked on a study of the history of York County to feature original research by the club members. Study groups were set up. The University Women's Club of York County had been successfully launched by a determined group of dedicated women. Before the end of the 50s, a constitution had been drawn up, a scholarship for a woman student had been awarded, and an ambitious program of study and community outreach was begun. In the 60s, some wonderful traditions began. Potluck dinners were started to raise money for scholarships, interest groups were established, and the debate of resolutions to be taken forward to the National Club was begun. As we celebrate our 50th anniversary, many of our past presidents and longtime members have contributed their memories and perspectives on the activities of our club. Prepare to enjoy their descriptions of the many highlights of the past 50 years.
Do you remember when you joined CFUW and what were your thoughts when you joined?
A friend who suggested it would be a great spot to meet friends, and I was new in Newmarket, and I thought, yes, I will go with her, and I never looked back. Started at King Crafts out in King City, and we actually moved, I believe, to the Aurora Library and then to the Board of Education. We had meetings at the Quaker Meeting Place and possibly the King Library.
My next door neighbor, Flory Allen, invited me to join, and because I had just recently moved to the area, I thought it would be a nice way to get to know some of the women in the community. When I first joined, there were probably around 70, 75.
I was home with my kids, and they were all very young then. And I noticed a tiny little ad in the Aurora Banner at the time, saying that they were holding meetings, and so that's why I joined.
Well, I found it a very friendly group. One thing that I do remember is being greeted very warmly by Judy Craig. And we were meeting at the Kingcraft building in King City. And it just seemed like a very interesting and inviting group, so I continued to go.
My best story is that my neighbor in Stratford told me to call Judy Craig, and she would take me out to University Women, so I did that, and I haven't had a minute to spare since.
Another woman who had a smaller child as well, sitting by the pool waiting for the older one, and we got talking, and she was a member. And she said, "You should really join this club." And the first meeting that I went to was actually at the King City Library.
Being new to Aurora, I didn't know many people, and I was really involved with my kids at the school, but that's not an adult involvement. You want something to get into that has nothing to do with the rest of your life. It's just yours alone.
Yes, we just moved to King City from Toronto, and one of my neighbors told me about CFUW. I'd never heard of it before, and actually in May of '86 she invited me to come along with her to the May dinner, which I did, and I joined in September and have been a member ever since.
I was retiring in a few months, and really hadn't had time to meet many people up to here, and I thought this would be a good way to get to know people and maybe get more involved in my community. So.
I thought that this would be a great chance to meet professional women, and probably a lot of retired teachers or teachers in the later stages of their career. And I also read the brochure and felt that this was something that I would like to get my teeth into as far as the political end of it, and certainly the outreach in the community. So it was multifaceted, it suited me, and that first meeting was more or less exploratory, but from the moment I got in there and listened to Sylvia speak, I was pretty well committed.
Actually, I first joined because I had a plan. I think I'm a very organized person. I knew I'd be retiring within 5 or 10 years, and I wanted to be ready for retirement, so I joined CFUW because I knew a bit about it. I went to a few general meetings, went to May dinners, joined one book club because working full-time, that's really all I had time for. And I think my first impression was that it was a very busy group in doing lots of things, and I didn't know anybody except Sue Bright, who was a past president who had actually suggested I join, but they just seemed very friendly, so I thought I'll get to know some of these women eventually, and of course I did.
Valerie Pepper actually asked me, before I joined, that was, to come to one of the book club meetings. She said she was the hostess. She just asked me to go, and I went, and I was just so impressed by these women. They were not only presenting well the book that they had read, but I felt they were open and receptive. I remember thinking at the time, my God, where were they when I needed them 30 years ago and I moved into this area? So to me, this is what made me want to join, is that book club.
We're all familiar with the mission statement of CFUW. Could you give examples of how we were active in those areas when you were president of the club?
Certainly in the pursuit of knowledge and education, I think we had a very eclectic series of people who would come and speak to us on a great variety of topics.
And we did some music programs. We did a program with Doreen Hiltz, who was a president, and she sang, because she's got a lovely voice, and we did a musical program at St. Andrew's College with a friend of mine who came up from the city and talked about the art of accompanying. So that was one program we did, and we had Laura Sabia at one point. And we had Janet Burton, from Kleinberg, Pierre Burton's wife, and she was part of a panel that was on ecology, and that was at that time.
One of the other things that the club was nationally involved in was the struggle against pornography. And this was the time when Not a Love Story was making a very significant impact. And certainly I recall writing letters, especially for one reason or another, to Markham Council about placing pornographic literature behind shaded covers and removing it from the range of children, and which they did very shortly.
We put out book barrels and gathered up books, and we did it 5 years in a row, and that was the last one. And it was a big community event, and people really did seem to look forward to it. The local grocery stores let us put big barrels in the lobbies, and we had everybody seemed to be involved, and members would go out and empty the books out of the barrels on a regular basis, and there were big book sorting parties, and it was an event that the community seemed to come to look forward to. It was in April every spring. It would be this big used book sale. And
one project that we were involved in, actually since 1995 I believe, was the Spotlight on Women in Science and Technology conference. And this was originally initiated by the York Region District School Board, and then in 1995 Gina Black, one of our members, got involved and worked very closely with the school board and brought CFUW into the picture. And the members of our club were hostesses for the conference. The conference was for grade 7 and 8 girls, and they had an opportunity to learn about careers in science and technology. And the club, in later years, like when I was president, we became more involved in helping to recruit speakers for the conference and the organization of it.
Well, I'll start on the larger scale, and I think that one of the things that the club hadn't been involved in for a long time was letter writing for advocacy. And certain matters came to my attention, and I believe that during that first year particularly, I got very involved with the Ontario Club's agenda for letter writing and brought in a few issues of my own. For example, letters to the government regarding the taking of water from the Tay River in the Temagami region. The water was being sold, and this became a successful letter writing campaign. The awards committee needed a review, and new members were coming in that were willing to take this on, so it was revamped. At that time, Sylvia mentioned to me that the executive manuals needed to be totally rewritten and brought up to date, and I think that was done during my time in Lorraine's, so I think now they're quite useful. And I think there were a few new positions on executive created.
In terms of pursuit of knowledge, I think through our guest speakers at our general meetings, we certainly have educated our members. Promotion of education. When I was vice president, I was in charge of awards for 1 year, and made me aware of how much we really do promote education. We gave prizes to 13 different high school students, a mature woman student at Seneca, $500, a mature woman student at York, another $500. So I think that certainly met that focus. Something that happened the year I was in charge, we previously gave dictionaries to graduating high school students in the northern half of the region. But with the help of the awards committee, we decided that we would change that to a $100 gift certificate from chapters. And I found out just this spring that's now been changed to a $100 check to graduating students in the schools. In terms of community involvement, I noticed during my 5 years in executive, the community outreach group became much more active, all sorts of fundraising projects, community support projects. So I think our club does meet the mission statement in all sorts of ways. Actually, in terms of advocacy, I can give you a very specific example. In the summer and fall of 2005, the Ontario Liberal government was planning on introducing new legislation to amend the Arbitration Act, and under these changes, religious law, specifically Sharia law, would have been allowed in the resolution of family disputes. CFUW, especially Ontario Council, was not in favor of that. So they worked with various other women's groups to lobby the government to have that legislation changed. So our club, for example, wrote a letter stating our position, why we were against those amendments. And as it turned out, the government changed. Now there will be really no use of religious law in family arbitration. So I remember that as a success.
I got the feeling they are actually, everyone is active. We actually live it because of who we are as people, as members. That's why I think we joined Federation, because we feel that way towards education, towards empowering others and so on. Even in the books that we read, we choose. Every book club chooses different books at different time, but eventually we all sometimes discuss them even during our walks.
What were women doing when you first joined CFUW, and do you feel their role has changed?
The stay-at-home mums are now the working mums, and they don't have the time to come to meetings or get involved in interest groups like we did, and they're home helping their kids with homework.
I think my generation was an in-between generation in that my mother's generation was the generation that stayed home. We were the generation that stayed home while our children were young and then started working after they started to school. And I think part of the reason we joined the club was that we needed an intellectual outlet while our children were small.
Well, yes, I think women are more active, they're more aware of their position and their power, and I don't mean that in a strong sense, but I do mean that they're more aware of what they can do and what their obligations are, not only to their family but to their work, and so we do more things in different ways.
There don't seem to be as many young women with young children in the club as there were when I first joined. And perhaps that's because more of them are in the workforce. And if you're in the workforce and you're home and you have small children, you don't really have a lot of time left over for other interests.
I think that the interest groups have changed. They're more varied, from theology, film appreciation, photography. Yeah, I think it's really quite interesting and really good, all the new interest groups.
I think women that have been in the workforce all their life, particularly professional women, when they retire, they're looking around to keep up that social connection with other women of like mind. And CFUW is a great outlet for that. They're also given opportunities to keep very busy if they want to.
Teachers are retiring earlier, it would seem, from teaching elementary and high school. So we have a lot of retired teachers in the group, and they have the time and the interest, and they're, a lot of them, very involved in the running of the club as volunteers. I think what I've noticed is, since I've joined the club, women are much more attuned now with technology, the web and email being an example. And I think this is a carryover probably from the marketplace.
I noticed that this year for us, we've had a number of younger women join us. I think the situation is, do we retain them, and how do we manage to retain them? I think we need to work on retention of these younger members, because they bring new ideas, and it looks like for us, we were obviously interesting enough to attract them.
CFUW has a lot to do with friendship. Where do you feel we have been most successful in promoting friendship?
Well, I think friendship has always been a very important part of the club, and I think it's been nurtured by the wonderful interest groups that have grown from book clubs and bridge clubs into gardening clubs, and I think there's something for everybody. And Well, that's how the club grows. You have to get to know people through interest groups.
No question about it, it's the interest groups. When I first joined, we had a book club, investment club, and I think a French club. But that's how we formed fast friendships that have lasted for a long time.
Well, personally, that's a big thing in my life. The friends I've made are 95% from the University Women's Club, and many of them go back a long, long, long way.
And the annual dinners, we used to have them in people's homes, but we got too large to be able to do that. But that kind of thing where you're in personal contact with people seems to be really what brings the friendship along and brings the members back.
People like Judy Craig?
The interest groups. Hands down, there's just no question. I think the interest groups are what make the club hang together. And I think that anybody who joins CFUW should be steered straight to the sign-up table because that's the way to retain them in the membership.
Well, I think it's a friendly group to start off with. I know I've made some really great friends through this group, through the 20 years I've belonged. You come out to a meeting, people welcome you, we have our greeters, we have our ride program to help people who need rides to get to our meetings, which is really important because part of the meeting is also the going to it and coming home. If you can go with a friend or a group of friends, that's a whole part of the evening out.
I think it's the nature of the group and just the nature of the people that you meet when you join CFUW. I don't think we go actively out to try and promote it. I think it's a kind of a synergy when people get together, and I know when I joined I found people were very friendly.
Particularly for women coming in from other areas that don't know anyone, or people retiring and losing contact with their peers at work. It is a wonderful opportunity and the variety is tremendous. You can get involved in many different things.
Actually, that's interesting because I always felt it was in the genes of the club. It's almost inheritance. We seem to pass it on from one generation to the other. Everybody is all very friendly, and that's exactly what made me want to join. It's this, and women need that. I think it's a sense of belonging.
I'm sure there were many successful events over the years. Tell me about some that really stand out in your mind.
A friend of Mary Jean's was Ruth Moravitz, wife of a composer, Oscar Moravitz. And when I did my AR in my ARCT from the conservatory, I had sung 2 of his songs. So it was a thrill in that program to sing these 2 songs by Oscar Moravitz, accompanied by his wife. That was a thrill.
A friend of mine who's a composer called Nancy Telfer put together a musical group, and we sang songs and did some folk songs. And I was trying to remember what that program was. I've forgotten the program, but I know we practiced very hard and did some songs. The other programs which were very active at the time were programs that we put on, which were children's concerts with Clifford Poole, who was the conductor at York Symphony Orchestra. When I first joined, there was a well-known lady called Barbara Langstaff, whose name you'll see there, and her mother-in-law was Lillian Langstaff, and the Langstaff side road is named after that family in Richmond Hill. And I remember one of the first May dinners we had was at her home, which was a beautiful old home in Richmond Hill, which has since been moved, I think. The property was developed, but the house was moved. And I went there, and we all wore hats and gloves, and she had the house totally decorated with lilacs. It was just a wonderful, wonderful May dinner, and I think it was probably potluck.
When I was president, we celebrated our 25th anniversary. And so we held our annual dinner at Summit Golf and Country Club, which was a very nice facility. It was a beautiful sunny spring day. I remember it was really quite warm, And we all gathered there, and our guest of honor for that occasion was the Honourable Pauline McGibbon, and she spoke on the topic of volunteerism. And we were all quite impressed with her. And she was very friendly and warm and made us all feel quite relaxed. The club chose to honor the charter members who were still living at that time by granting them an honorary life membership. And I think that there were 4, and that they were Anne Duncan and Barbara Langstaff, and someone named Muriel, and her last name began with a W, but I can't exactly remember. And I think the 4th one was Cicely Thompson. And the yellow brick house was just starting up. We took on the project of decorating a room, which meant we had to paint it and make drapes for it and just get it all ready for its first resident. And it was a fun project that we enjoyed working on.
In May 1987, the University Women's Club of Toronto had their whole clubhouse renovated and ready to be opened for business again. I think that one of the problems that had preceded this was that they had to update to fire code, but they did it up on a grand scale, and it was beautifully redecorated, and a tent was erected in the backyard, and a great gala was planned with all kinds of dignitaries, as well as some music and food and frivolity. One of the really fun things that came out of this, for me anyway, was that there were several Toronto designers who donated the use of one of their gowns to be worn by several of the hostesses, and I got to be one of the people who wore this elegant gown. And it was strapless, which was not my style, but it was great fun to go down to Yorkville and have a fitting in the salon of this designer. And truthfully, I can't even remember what his name was, but it was fun, and the dress was glorious, but I didn't get to keep it.
Do you remember when the King Tut exhibit was at the ROM? I noticed an article in the local paper about somebody who was quite involved with it. I can't remember what her role was. I think she was an historian, and who happened to live in Oak Ridges, and she'd be great. And we didn't plan our programs quite as far ahead then as we do now, and I was able to get her as a speaker for the next meeting, and that was one of the, because that was such a big thing in Toronto and people were flocking to see it, that meeting was one of the most crowded meetings that we had, and really seemed to be, and it was a lot of fun. She was so interesting, and it was so topical, and just one of those fortuitous things that happened.
One meeting that stands out in my mind was we had a fashion show one night at one of our general meetings, and that was kind of fun because some of our members were the models, and that was, you know, a light evening and very enjoyable. A May dinner that stands out in my mind was one that was held at Eaton Hall, where Seneca College is there now, and this is where Lady Eaton and built Eaton Hall. And for the guest speaker was actually someone who worked at Eaton Hall who told us the whole history of it. So that was really interesting because it's show and tell. We produced these mugs in celebration of our 40th anniversary in 1997. And we put together this cookbook called Celebrating 40 Years. And the proceeds from the sale of the mugs and the cookbook, some of the money from that went to purchase 14 meters on the Trans-Canada Trail, which was being built at that time. There is a plaque to commemorate the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the club and CFUW Aurora Newmarket at the Caledon East Pavilion on the Trans-Canada Trail. And Eunice MacArthur went to the unveiling of that in, I think it was October of 1998. And then I think in that spring afterwards, probably 99, the jaunters had a jaunt out in that area, and we had hiked on the trail for a little bit, and we had a look at the plaque to commemorate our donation with respect to the trail. So that's kind of unique and different.
Well, the year I was president was the year that the community outreach group was established. I think Rosemary Hamer was a big part of that. And I think that has been very successful. And each year we seem to be able to do a little more. We started a raffle. The first year I think we went out and tried to solicit from local businesses to give us things, and we found that difficult and so on. And then it has evolved as it has moved along. But I think, you know, we are giving to Yellow Brick House and Sandgate and Children's Aid and doing different things in the community. So I think in that way we're much more active than we were maybe, say, 10 years ago.
Excellent maid dinners. The maid dinners became so popular we've had to keep moving to bigger and bigger venues. We've been very successful in attracting new members. I think when I joined we probably had 175, and as I said earlier we're now up to 225. We continue to support education. We continue to support our community through community outreach. We made a smooth and successful move into Binions Hall at Trinity Church. So those are some of the things that I look back and think those were things that we worked at, but we were successful at them.
Paula Todd, who was doing our May dinner, she declined her fee. And I remember, I think it was $3,000 she had originally requested. So that is really, to me, a wonderful gift. The same thing with Ole Madston for that he donated his fee for the presentation that he did in February, and donated some of the plants, all of the plants that he brought at the time. To me, that's a wonderful thing.
What was your key focus of the club in the years that you were president?
Well, I think the key focus was to try and raise money and get that fund established so that we could continue to give scholarships and hopefully, you know, add to them and make them larger as time went on.
We were reaching out more to other clubs in the Central Ontario region and starting to participate on a wider scale in the committees of Ontario Council and looking at national issues in a bigger way. I think it was a reaching out time on all different levels.
So we actually conducted a survey of members that had left the previous year and had not returned to find out why were people not returning. And the main reason we found was that things had changed in people's lives. They just got too busy with other activities in their lives. Either they'd gone back to work full-time or that sort of thing. I think we got co-conveners to look after interest groups and really take a fairly more active role with respect to how the interest groups were run, and so that there would be spaces available for new members who were joining the club. And we also looked at our involvement in the community through our review. At that time we had an author's night every year, which was held in November, and the monies raised from the author's night was used to add funds to the awards capital fund to help sponsor our awards and to pay for the awards that we give.
We now have a lunchtime option for the Christmas potluck instead of just evening. We changed some of our scholarships. We were giving dictionaries, and we thought maybe that needed to be reviewed.
I worked really hard on taking photographs of club events so our archives have a record of the history of our club. And as it turns out, a lot of those pictures have ended up in the club newsletter, because I think we need to see what other groups are doing. So those are some of the things that I think I probably accomplished, with the help of a lot of other women, of course. Something else that we've been very successful at, and we'll find this out next year, is I think our whole planning process for the anniversary year has been very successful, because we started in April 2004 planning for next year, and I think that's why things already falling into place so well for the anniversary year. And I think that's why it's going to be such an exciting year, because we've taken the time, made the effort to plan some really interesting things. And it's interesting too, because it all goes back to our focus on education, because all sorts of events that will take place during the anniversary year will be fundraisers for our awards program, which I think is one of the priorities of our club.
For instance, when I first came in as a vice president, I felt that the members needed to know what the club nationally and international was doing. And I felt strongly that we needed to have a committee for issue for action committee, which eventually we did develop, and we have now a term of reference as well. But I felt that our members needed to reach out in our community. We need to get ourselves known. I remember Lorraine saying we are a club, the best kept secret in the region. I remember feeling, well, we're going to change that. And I felt very strongly, and I've tried to approach other community women groups, because I believe that together we can work on some projects together.
Finally, on a lighter note, can you recall any funny stories or events during your time with CFUW?
Oh, yes. When I was program convener, I arranged to have a speaker from the women's liberation movement, and that was most interesting to all the club. It caused a lot of controversy because, well, as one woman put it to me after, she said, they're nothing but a bunch of communists and a bunch of men haters. And I know when I picked one of the speakers up, she made some comment about my capitalist car. I had a station wagon at the time and drove her to the meeting, and there were 3 of them, you know, dressed in their army boots and probably braless. And our club really put them through the mill, and I think deservedly so, because they had some ideas that we didn't think were necessarily maybe the views that all women held, although we were all wanting equal human or equal rights, but they were quite different.
There was a very active women's lib organization at the time, and we did have one group, and this was a very controversial evening we had. We had a group of women come up, maybe 4 or 5, and talk about the women's lib, and I'm not sure that was even the name they were under, but anyway, they were so adamant and negative to men that a lot of us were very upset about it, and but you couldn't discuss it, you couldn't talk to them, they were so opinionated. I don't know how they thought life was going to go on, but they didn't want a man involved in their lives. And the other thing that was going on at the time was the ecology, sort of the birth of the ecology movement. And so we had people talking about ecology and saving paper and all these issues that are still here.
We found this in News and Notes, which I assume was the newsletter at the time. Could you read the second paragraph?
And congratulations to Mary Jean Oliver for a different kind of production. She had a new son born December 30th, 1960. And his name's John, and he's the chap who's out west.
I was just going to say that the way we produced the newsletter was quite different from how we do it now. And the newsletter secretary, I remember, lived in Newmarket on my way to the Newmarket High School where I was teaching part-time. And I would pick up the dittos from her and go to the school and teach it. And then when I finished teaching, I would run them off. And the school board didn't know it, but they provided the paper for all of this. And then I would take them back to her place, and she'd have to put them all together and then by hand write out the addresses and mail them.
Well, I mentioned the fashion shows. That was fun. I think the more recently is the raffles that we have at the November meetings are a lot of fun, and that has proved to be a really excellent fundraiser to support?
Grace and I were on our way to an AGM in Regina. This was July 2004, so we were flying out of Pearson. Lots of other women from clubs all over Ontario were also at Pearson. A lot of us flying on the same flight. So we were walking down the jetway, and I whispered to Grace, "Grace, there's going to be somebody famous on this plane." And she looked at me and she thought I was teasing or making something up. And I said, no, Grace, there's somebody famous getting on this plane. Turned out it was Pinball Clemens, coach of the Toronto Argonauts. And then it turned out it wasn't just pinball, it was the whole Argonauts team was on this plane. But what I found so amusing was the players were scattered throughout the plane, and so were these women who represented the clubs. So you had these very large, broad-shouldered men sitting right next to these kind of fragile little women. And I always thought there must have been the most interesting conversations on that plane, because we talk about two different priorities. They were going out west to defeat the Rough Riders in Regina. We were going out to meet all these delegates from across Canada to talk women's issues and social policy. So I think it was a lovely mixture of things going on in that plane. And for some reason, that sticks in my mind as something small, but something memorable.
Yeah, you're right. There was many. Well, I guess the most recent thing that happened, Belinda Stronach, our member of parliament, one day I was working in the garden, I was carrying my phone at the back, I didn't want to miss anybody's call, and I picked up and she says hello, and I'm thinking, who's that? And she says, Belinda Stronach. I said, who? The secretary? She says, no, Belinda. I said, somebody from the office? No, it's really Belinda. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know that she would really actually call me. I was so surprised. And anyway, we had a nice chat. I informed her about our club, and she was quite surprised that we had such a large number, and she wanted to meet us and informed on some of our policy and what we stood for. And at the time was the Arbitration Act going into under discussion in Ontario, so she I updated on it and our view of the club, our position, and she gave me her cell number. And I remember thinking, my God, I got Belinda's cell number, I can't believe it.
That's very cute. We have heard from many of our past presidents and our long-time members and enjoyed their memories and stories. Now I will talk to Valerie Hume, who's been our president for the year 2007. Valerie has had the challenge of guiding us through this great 50th anniversary year. We've had a number of special celebrations during the year. Can you tell us about them, Valerie?
This has been a fabulous year for our club. One of our goals for the anniversary year was to highlight the profile of our club within the community. We started in May 2006 with our annual dinner, where Paula Todd, a TVO personality, was our guest speaker. In June of 2006, our club participated in the Aurora street sale, where we gave out information about CFUW in general and specifically about the benefits of being a member of our club, Aurora Newmarket. In September, our special anniversary cookbook was published, and at the general meeting for that month, several of our club members dressed up in 50s outfits and served treats that they made from recipes contained within that cookbook. In October, there was a card party at the Cardinal Golf Club where 140 of our members came together and enjoyed a lovely lunch and then continued on throughout the afternoon to play cards, which involved either bridge or euchre or even Scrabble, as the case may be. In February of 2007, there was a Valentine Tea held on Valentine's Day at Madson's Greenhouse and Garden Centre in Newmarket. Part of the event involved a fashion show where our own club members were the models, and it also featured an artist's showcase where several of our very talented club members were able to show their work. In April, we brought back an old tradition and held an author's night where Barbara Gowdy, a renowned author and winner of the Order of Canada Award, read from her new book, Helpless. After her reading, she answered many questions from the audience and then continued on to sign copies of her book. At our May dinner in 2007, Janice Matthews, the author of Chicken Soup for the Canadian Soul, was our guest speaker. It was held at the Cardinal Golf Club, and there were several guests in attendance, including Ardith Toogood, our national CFUW president, Linda McGregor, our Ontario Council president, Joanne Jameson, our regional director, and also Julia Monroe, our local member of provincial parliament. Then that was followed by the bench dedication for the bench that was donated by the hikers and walkers. It's there for everyone to enjoy as they trail through Shepherd's Bush. Also, at the end, we capped off the year with a special overnight jaunt, where 52 of our members went for an overnight jaunt to Prince Edward County. All of this, of course, has been recorded in our time capsule, which will be sealed and put away until our next special anniversary year. All of these events did help us achieve our highlighting the profile of our club within the community, but more than that, many people came together from different parts of the club to launch all of these special events, and new friendships were developed and many lasting memories were created. After all, who can forget trudging through the snow in our 50s outfits to go to the Valentine tea on the absolute worst day of the winter?
At the beginning of our anniversary year, we decided to raise enough money during the year for a special scholarship. Tell us about the scholarship, and did we in fact reach our goal?
It was a scholarship that was intended to be for a mature female university student who was from York Region. Early on, we thought that we would probably be able to raise about $3,000 for this scholarship. But as things got going and the money started to come in, we realized that we would probably be closer to $6,000. However, as the year has ended and all the events are finished, we've actually raised $8,300. CFUW will always be a very strong social support network for women. However, I think in future, our Issues Committee will start to take on more importance. This year, for example, we noticed that many of our members were not attending some events because they were busy tending to their grandchildren. So our Issues Committee launched a program to educate our members about what's happening with childcare within this region. And we did that through the newsletter articles, through display boards, at general meetings in February, March, and April of 2007. And we also had a postcard campaign where members could send a postcard to their members of provincial parliament or members of parliament, as they chose, to highlight the need for appropriate childcare within the region. Next year, we are going to look at the issue of water and the environment. We think that this is an issue that is very important for the local community and will be of interest to our members. So as I see it, the Issues Committee is going to take on a role of helping to educate our members about local issues.
I just want you to know that 50 years ago, the initial group that started this club met at this place. In fact, this side of the partition, the extension wasn't done. And so 50 years later, we're back where we started. So I think that it's, a wonderful opportunity that we have been offered.